Welcome to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Trey Adams. This program is a presentation of the Communications Department of Northeast State Community College. This episode of Direction Northeast talks with a former NFL player whose career and life was changed by the Vietnam War. His life and his fight for veterans will be on tap when we return.
As a mother of two in my late 20s and through a lot of ups and downs, I still had a dream of going to college. On top of being a parent, I was working 60 plus hours as a restaurant manager and I didn't know how to get started. Northeast State Community College gave me that opportunity. After a degree from Northeast State, I'm now a graduate of Columbia University and I'm pursuing my PhD at Harvard. Thank you, Northeast State, for helping me to believe in myself.
Robert Patrick Rocky Belier defines what it takes to succeed in times of change, conquer insurmountable odds, and become an extraordinary achiever. Through his story of courage and determination, he motivates audiences to reach for their goals despite all obstacles. A native of Appleton, Wisconsin, Belier started football in high school and earned a scholarship to the prestigious University of Notre Dame. When he graduated from college in 1968, he found himself selected in two drafts, one by the Steelers of the National Football League and one by the United States Army. Today, our guest is Rocky Belier. Mr. Belier, welcome to Direction Northeast. How are you today,
Well,
sir?
thank you. I'm fine, Trey. Thanks for having me on the show. Before we begin, I just want to take this opportunity to, on this Veterans Weekend, to thank all our veterans out there who are listening to this show for their service and their commitment to their country.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. And Mr. Belier, I am so honored to be sharing the same stage with you. You are a veteran. You made an incredible sacrifice going to Vietnam, as well as millions of other Americans. And for all of us here, we sincerely thank you for your sacrifice on the battlefield. It is just absolutely extraordinary what courageousness you have. So we're going to go ahead and get started here with the interview.
That'd be fine.
Rocky, you were born on March 5th, 1946 to Bob and Ellen Belier.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about growing up in Appleton, Wisconsin.
We have to understand Appleton, Wisconsin is a small little Midwestern town just south of Green Bay. And the industry, or the primary industry up in that whole area, was paper mills. And so it was a blue-collar town, and I grew up in a bar. Now, people go, wow. So I grew up in a bar. Dad owned a bar. We lived behind the bar at the time, slept upstairs. And I had three siblings within it. I got two sisters and a brother. But that was your life. We were a block from downtown. You know, I was a block from the grade school. I was a block and a half from the grade school, a block from church. So it was a community, and I met a lot of wonderful people that walked into that bar and sat on those stools across from my father. So it was a great experience.
Mm-hmm. Where was the bar located exactly?
Well, the bar was located one block off of Main Street, which is College Avenue, and it was right across from the brewery. There was another bar right next door to us, and so it was pretty much midtown of Appleton. But it was just as I look back, I got very fond memories of that time and growing up there.
Mm-hmm. Did your dad have a lot of friends that came into the bar to see him?
Well, just because of the nature of the business, you make a lot of friends over a period of time. So you got your regular customers that are coming in. So the bar opens at 8 o'clock in the morning because of the midnight shift guys who were coming off out of the mills. They would stop in on their way home, and so it was just a different time of day. It would close at 1 o'clock at night. So throughout the day, people would stop, vendors would stop, I truly enjoyed that atmosphere, and you just got to know a lot of people that would stop in and say hi and so on and so on. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Your original name was Robert Patrick Belier.
Yeah.
How did you get the nickname Rocky, and what made it stick?
Well, actually, I got my nickname when I was born, and so the guys would come in for the mill, as I just talked about, and they go. I was the firstborn, and they go to my father, Bob, and said, "Hey, Bob, how's that new kid of yours?" Well, being a very proud father, he said, "Oh, you should see him. He's got all these little muscles. He looks like a little rock sitting in that crib." And then you forget about it, and they would come back in, and they would go, "Hey, Bob, how's that little rock of yours?" He goes, what do you mean? You know, your kid. And that's how I got it, and that stuck with me forever.
That's a pretty cool nickname. I watched some of your highlights, and that definitely does stick out.
It worked well.
What were some of the important values that your parents instilled in you as a kid?
Well, you know, and especially growing up in small town America, and I don't care where you are, you know, those values of hard work, those values of giving 100% in your job, those values of community, of faith, and the belief that, you know, those are ingrained by your experience, by your parents, and by the atmosphere around in the neighborhood. So those are the kind of you know, values that they taught you.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that today's generation is kind of missing that, like in terms of instilling values into this
Well,
generation?
you know, I don't know whether this generation, and I suppose all generations, you know, when you're going through that, are viewed by older generations of, oh, you know, it's not like our generation. You know, you don't have the same values of work ethic and so on. And I think all the generations, if you go back into the Roaring 20s, you know, into the 40s after the war, into the 60s and the 70s as I was a young man, and things that have changed. And so today, you know, it really boils around family values, boils around what you are influenced by, and who is your influencers. Your influences are your parents, first of all, and majority, then by your teachers, by coaches, and people that are around, or that are around you, or activities you're involved in. So those are the kind of qualities that, you know, that you will absorb from your environment. So, you know, sometimes when you are kids that are separated, kids that, you know, are having difficulties, or live somewhere, you know, sometimes that might affect. But I think that, you know, I think the majority of families today, you know, have good values, and, you know, and want to impart those to the kids.
Mm-hmm. Rocky, what was it like growing up with multiple siblings? And tell me some of the fun things that you did as kids.
You know, you have to understand, growing up, it was before television, except for my youngest sister. She was maybe 2, 3 when we got our first television at the time. So your activities were in the neighborhood. So your activities were going outside. All those old stories that you hear about, yeah, you kick you out and don't come back until dinner. You know, were kind of true. So you had a group of guys in the neighborhood. You know, my siblings, you know, so my sister is 2 years younger than me, then I got a brother that's 4 years, and then I got another sister that's 8 years younger. So, you know, you just were family. You're growing up, and nothing extraordinary, but you played in the neighborhood. You had your friends were in the neighborhood. You'd pick up sports. You'd play hide and go seek. You'd play jump rope. You do all those things that would keep you active. So at least for me, as I look back on that experience, you know, it was a wonderful upbringing. You know, and some of my dearest friends are those friendships that you made back then.
That's great. You went to Xavier High School. You played multiple sports, but of course your passion was football. What drew you to football more than like basketball and track and other sports like that?
You know, I think that at that time, so I think that in high school, you know, if you play sports, or you have a tendency to want to play sports, you know, you just kind of play all sports, you know. So at our high school, I did play basketball, and I did play football. And, you know, you ran track, and during the summer you played baseball, and we played American Legion baseball. We didn't have a high school baseball team at the time. You just play because you want to play. Well, I think it gets to a point where you go, okay, out of all these sports, you know, which one are you better at? I'm 5'9½", so I wasn't going to be a major basketball player in any college program. But football, I fit in well, and we had a great high school. We had a great high school team, and what becomes important in this little story I'm going to tell you is the team aspect, the team, the individuals, and then the head coach. So there's always a catalyst. I don't care where it might be, a teacher or a coach along the way, that pulls individuals together, that molds them into a team, and it's the success of that team that gets you recognized for a contribution that you made or be a part of, and so now people take notice of you. So in high school, and I have to tell you this, in high school we never lost a football game. And so we won the conference. It was a brand new conference. We were the number one team in the state of Wisconsin at that time. In basketball, we only lost 4 games in those years that we played. We were state champions. We played for the state championship twice, won it once, lost it my senior year. So, but it was a great experience, to do that. I even played in the band at the time. So all those experiences were very important. But it gets you a recognition to be able to move on and go. So football became that recognition for me and the success. And so the interest I got from colleges to possibly play, came in that area.
And of course, you went on to play for the University of Notre Dame. What drew you to that school?
Like I always tell people, I said this, you have to understand. So, okay, one of the things you're taught. So being a good Catholic boy that I am, so after 8 years of Notre Dame Guns, 4 years of Christian Brothers, and you have to make a decision. So what's ingrained in you is you go to church, and you get on your knees and you pray for guidance and direction, in which I did. And then I did what my mother wanted me to do, and that was go to Notre Dame. So that's how I ended up at Notre Dame. But Notre Dame was a good fit. There was, I liked the school. I liked the smallness of the school at the time, the interaction of the students for the short period that I was there on a recruiting trip, and so and we had a brand new head coach. Not that he was a legend at that time, but just came in to change the program, Eric Parsegian. So all of a sudden become fortunate to come under his coaching ability and his guidance and the program changes.
Mm-hmm. I got to ask you, what do you consider your most successful season at Notre Dame?
Well, I would have to say my most successful season is the 1966, my junior year, in 1966. So it was an undefeated year for us. Yeah, so we were, except it was an undefeated year. We're going to the last game of the season. So this goes down in the annals, and we just had our 50th, our 50th anniversary of that game. Oh, I don't know where the time went. Anyway, and so the game was the Michigan State Notre Dame game. 2 number 1 ranked teams at that time playing at the end of the season for the mythical national champions. See, what you don't understand was that unlike today, it was a vote. It was just voted by the writers and who was going to be the number 1. And we didn't have all the publicity like they had. We didn't have all the television coverage, So this was, it was captured the imagination of the American people of this country, because finally, we're going to have a definitive answer of who is going to play this game. Okay. And the amazing thing, it was not on national television.
Really?
Really. And it was not on national television because at that time the rules is that you could only be on, have a national television game. I think you could only have 2 national television televised games.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe 1. But Notre Dame had already been on a national televised game. Mm-hmm. So this game, they got so much heat, the networks, that they did it on a delayed broadcast. But anyway, in this game, so on this field, there were 31 players that ultimately would play in the NFL. 25 All-Americans, 10 first-round draft choices in the NFL, all together on this team. And it ended in a tie.
Ended in a tie?
There was no overtime, no sudden death as we have today. It was just, that was it.
That is unbelievable.
And so because of that, it probably, the longevity of that game and the impact of that game was very crucial. Now, the biggest impact of that game, and I'm just saying, the biggest impact of that game was you also have to understand what was taking place here, what was taking place within our country. So there were there were student movements, Vietnam War, demonstrations that were taking place. Then there was a civil rights movement that was taking place. And Southern schools did not allow blacks to be in the classroom and or on the playing field. But Northern schools did, and schools out in the West and the Southwest all did. And so when Michigan State had 17 black players on that field within that game. So it was a great showcase, for Michigan State, but more importantly, in a movement of time of black players coming out of the South and being able to play this game of football. So it was a huge game in that response, but in a 10-10 tie. And because of that, we still talk about it 50 years later. So.
Of course, you talk about the Vietnam. What were some of your personal feelings about the U.S. going to war with Vietnam before you were drafted? And then what was your feelings that when you found that you were drafted?
I think, the feeling was at the time. So the war was going on. You live your life at that time. So my focus was in college. So you're in college and you're playing football, and so that became the focus. Vietnam was going on. Some of my high school friends, had been drafted or enlisted coming out of high school, and then you hear stories about guys dropping out of college and then being drafted and going. So I was really apolitical at the time. I didn't know. My focus was playing football at Notre Dame and, and getting through that period of time. And so when I got drafted into the NFL, so when I got drafted in the NFL, it was like, oh, okay, fine. Well, I'll see if I make this team. If I make this team, my perception was that, well, if I make this team, as they've done in the past, other football players get into the National Guard or the Reserve, which was an option for students out there as well as for anybody else. So I just thought, well, that would take the. Well, as this fate unfolds, players fall through the cracks. I was one of those players that fell through a crack, and I got drafted. Okay. So there was no lottery back then, so you have to understand. So it's a random choice, you get drafted, and so then all of a sudden, bam, you're gone. But that was the life of thousands of other young men during that whole period of time who did get drafted, who was in school, dropped out of school, or what might have taken place. And then they had a choice. The choice was to either be drafted and spend 2 years and then 4 years in the reserve, or to enlist and spend 4 years, within a military branch of the service. And some opt to leave the country, and some became a conscientious objector. But those were all options, that took place. So all of a sudden, you get drafted. Oh, now that was an eye opener at the time, but it was like I reported in 48 hours after I got my draft notification.
Mm-hmm. Describe to us about the day that when you left for Vietnam. What was it like?
When I left for Vietnam, it was like, okay, so you went, I think at that period of time, it was more reaction to the situation than it was actually thinking or emotionally getting involved in it. It was I left Pittsburgh, boom, I went to basic training, so then I went to advanced infantry training. Then I flew home, had a week and said hi, goodbye, found myself in San Francisco, got orders to go to Vietnam, and then shipped out of there to go to, so it was kind of a whirlwind thing, not knowing what was really happening in Vietnam or what was taking place. You had drill sergeants that would tell you, other people would come back, but it's an experience that you have to have. So it really wasn't until I got there in country, and I finally got with my unit that the reality kind of set in, and I was out, and my unit was out in the field, and I came back to an LZ landing zone, in which an area in which we operated from, and so they just came humping out of the valley up into the hill, and my first reaction was, they had that drawn look. They had that, veteran look, like every movie had. I mean, guys were, just had that stare, dragging themselves up to this top of the mountain. And that's when I first met my unit. And so it was like, the reality, finally set in of what was taking place at that moment of time. So one of the things is that I think what you learn, you learn in sports and in life is a reaction to a situation and how you react to a situation. And so you just kind of go back to that basic work ethic that you have for doing a job, making sure that the job is done correctly, your part of that job, whatever that might be. You got a team that you have their back, and so everybody's kind of relying on one another to get you through this, and the biggest thing is getting through this experience the best possible way you can so that you can get back home.
Mm-hmm. Rocky, given that you're a veteran, what are some of the concerns that you personally have with returning soldiers coming back from the battlefield?
I think there's two things. There's two kind of concerns. One from a public opinion concern. And my public opinion concern is that most people, I think the majority of people out there, have this image of returning soldiers that are all wounded. If you served in the Middle East at this part of time, is that there's something wrong with you. You're going to have some brain damage or emotional damage or whatever it might be. Now that does happen, yes, and that's part of the thing. But the majority of our military, serve our country, do a job, and come back and assimilate back into their communities and start businesses and small businesses or start working for other people. And so I think that first of all, is that we have to change that perception. Now, for those that have problems, so the biggest problem is post-traumatic stress, being separated. The divorce rate in our country is 50%. In the military, it is a little higher. But if you go to one deployment overseas, that divorce rate goes up to 80-some%. Okay, so all of a sudden it has a trickle-down effect, to not only just you to handle your problems, but also now you get kids or families, and so it becomes a multiplier. So if we can help those soldiers coming back deal with that stress and get counseling to some degree, then we get a stronger family unit. But those are a lot of the problems, or some of the problems of coming back, and then ultimately it becomes a spiral effect. If you don't handle the problem, then it turns into depression. Then depression might turn into a substance abuse of one nature or another, just to be able to handle depression, and then it leads to suicide. So our suicide rate in the military today is, well, as they pronounce, is 22 suicides a day. Now that's over all the military, older military people, as well as our returning veterans, and having to deal with that. So that has to be, cut down. One of the ways of being able to cut that down is the recognition of people and help in communities helping their veterans, and just a recognition, so if you got a friend that's a veteran, and all of a sudden, he seems distant, or he seems enclosed, or he's not getting out, then it's really up to us to step in and say, okay, fine, there's something that's not right here. We need to get some help. We need to get you to the VA. We need to get you some counseling of some nature or another. And so that awareness becomes as important as anything else.
Mm-hmm. Just the last question here. With the growing concern of treatment and care of veterans and VAs all across the country, what are some of the improvements that you would want to propose to be made to be sure that veterans receive the best possible care that they truly deserve?
I think that unfortunately, like our news, is that bad news travels much further than any good news out there. I think that I think there are situations where the VA specifically, or some VAs, may not be able to respond to a problem or has some problems. But overall, and I'm saying this overall, in general, our VA system really is does wonders. I mean, it's a bureaucracy and it's big, but when you go to the VAs, as I have, and you talk to the people who are serving our veterans, yeah, I mean, they're dedicated. They know, you get back up like anything else, but a lot of times is that, then the stories of those that may have died in the VA, come forward, but they don't tell the stories about all the good stuff and how it is helped people and who get into the VA and into the system and are helped by that system. So I want people to understand that the VA system is the system we have, and it's not broken. Can it be fixed? Well, it's like anything else that can be fixed. Universities can be fixed. Tuition can be fixed, that's going up. And so I think we have a great director that understands from a public point of view of what needs to be changed. And I think there are people that are doing that, are changing it. So the VA system is, is good, can be better as what a response time is basically it. But sometimes you get a small VA in a community and you get people coming in and it just gets backed up or paper's lost or whatever it is, and so it becomes frustrating. Those are the stories that we hear. But overall, I think it does a fine job.
Well, that's great. Rocky, did you have a great trip coming here today?
Yeah, I did. It was great. It was a nice trip coming down and coming down to the Tri-Cities. It's always nice. I've been here in this area before, so it's nice to be visiting once again.
Well, it's nice to have you here. Thank you. We'll be right back in just a moment to wrap up Direction Northeast.
My name is Jason Tipton. I'm a manufacturing technician for A.O. Smith, and I got my start at Northeast State. As part of my job here, I do design work with CAD, and those plans are implemented throughout the factory. And I continue to use a lot of what I've learned at Northeast State on a daily basis. I'm the type person that likes working with my hands, and now that I've got a degree from Northeast State, I'm able to do something I enjoy. In manufacturing, it's important to have the right tool for the job. Having an education from Northeast State has been that tool for my career.
That concludes the program for today. We met a hero on and off the field with a champion for veterans' rights, Mr. Rocky Belier. Community is very important to the students at Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until next time, on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of Northeast State Community College, I'm Trey Adams, and this is Direction Northeast.